You are nothing. The words hung in the air like poison, and Alara felt them settle into her bones the way they always did. Beta Cassandra stood before her in the pack kitchen, perfectly sculpted features twisted into an expression of disgust, her manicured hand pointing toward the pile of bloodied training clothes that needed washing. You cannot even speak to defend yourself. What kind of wolf has no voice? What kind of creature cannot howl at the moon? Alara kept her eyes down, her hands already reaching for the soiled garments, her silence as familiar as breathing. She had learned long ago that trying to communicate through gestures or written words only made things worse. People did not want to understand her. They wanted to ignore her. And she had become very good at being invisible. The Blood Moon Pack territory buzzed with frantic energy that evening. Warriors rushing through corridors, Omegas preparing the great hall with trembling hands. Everyone acutely aware that Alpha, King Kale, was returning from the Northern Wars. Alara had never seen him. She was only 19, and he had left for battle before she had come of age. But she had heard the stories. Everyone had. The Besta da Guerra, the war beast, the Lycan so savage that he had single-handedly turned the tide of 3 major conflicts, his wolf form so massive that it blotted out the moon when he transformed, his rage so complete that enemy packs surrendered at the mere mention of his name. He did not take prisoners. He did not show mercy. He was a force of nature wrapped in flesh and fury, and he was coming home. Make yourself useful for once, Cassandra hissed, shoving another basket of linens into Alara's arms. The Alpha King arrives within the hour, and everything must be perfect. Not that he would notice something as worthless as you. She laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. Although perhaps that is for the best. Can you imagine? The war beast laying eyes on a defective mute Omega? He would probably put you out of your misery. Other pack members within earshot chuckled, and Alara felt the familiar burn of shame crawl up her neck. She nodded once, keeping her expression carefully blank, and carried the heavy basket toward the washing rooms. Her wolf stirred inside her, a presence she had always felt but never heard, never connected with the way others described. She could not shift, could not howl, could not do any of the things that made someone a true wolf. She was broken, in every way that mattered. The great hall had been transformed into something magnificent. Banners bearing the Blood Moon crest hung from vaulted ceilings, tables groaned under the weight of roasted meats and aged wine, and every surface gleamed with polish and pride. Alara worked in the shadows as always, arranging flowers, lighting candles, making sure everything was flawless while staying completely unnoticed. She wore the same gray dress she always wore, her dark hair pulled back in a simple braid, her feet bare, because shoes were considered a privilege for those who contributed to the pack. She did not mind. Shoes only made noise, and noise drew attention, and attention brought pain. The drums began at sunset. Deep, rhythmic booms that echoed through the territory, announcing the Alpha King's arrival. Alara felt the vibrations in her chest, felt her wolf respond with something that might have been recognition, or might have been fear. She could not tell the difference anymore. The entire pack assembled in the great hall, hundreds of wolves arranged by rank, all of them dressed in their finest, all of them wearing expressions of eager anticipation mixed with primal terror. Alara stood in the very back, pressed against the cold stone wall, hoping to disappear entirely. She watched as Beta Marcus took his place at the front, Cassandra at his side wearing a dress of deep crimson that clung to her curves like a second skin, her blonde hair cascading over bare shoulders, her smile predatory and confident. The doors exploded open. That was the only way to describe it. They did not swing or creak. They burst inward as if struck by a battering ram, and the scent that flooded the hall made every wolf present drop their eyes in immediate, instinctive submission. Alpha. Not just any alpha, but the alpha. Primal, ancient, utterly dominant. Alara felt her knees buckle, felt her body try to bow even though she was already tucked against the wall. The scent was overwhelming. Pine and smoke, and something wild that made her wolf claw frantically inside her chest, desperate to get closer, desperate to get away, desperate for something Alara could not name. He entered like a storm-given form. Kale was massive, easily 6.5 feet of pure muscle, wrapped in black leather and battle-worn armor. His shoulders broad enough to block out the light from the doorway. His presence so commanding that the air itself seemed to bend around him. His hair was long and dark, pulled back from a face that looked carved from granite, all sharp angles and brutal beauty. But it was his eyes that stole Alara's breath. They were gold, pure, molten gold, that seemed to glow with their own inner fire, scanning the assembled pack with the lazy menace of a predator surveying prey. Scars covered every visible inch of his skin, some old and faded, others fresh and angry, each one a testament to battles survived and enemies destroyed. He moved with the fluid grace of something barely contained, something that could explode into violence at any moment, and every wolf in that hall felt it in their bones. "Alpha King," Beta Marcus said, his voice strong but his body language screaming submission. "Welcome home. The Blood Moon Pack rejoices at your victorious return." Kale did not acknowledge him. His golden eyes swept the room, moving from face to face with mechanical precision, and Alara watched wolves flinch and look away as that terrible gaze passed over them. She knew she should look down, knew that meeting an alpha's eyes, especially this alpha's eyes, was grounds for punishment or worse. But something kept her frozen, kept her staring, even as her rational mind screamed at her to submit, to hide, to become invisible the way she always did. And then those golden eyes found her. The world stopped, literally stopped. Alara felt time itself pause as Kale's gaze locked onto hers across the crowded hall, and the connection that snapped into place between them was so powerful, so visceral, that she gasped silently, her hand flying to her chest where her heart had begun to pound like a war drum. She watched his nostrils flare, watched his entire massive body go rigid, watched something flicker across his brutal features that looked almost like recognition. No, not recognition, realization. If you are enjoying this story, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. Kale moved. One moment he was standing in the doorway, the next he was striding through the hall with single-minded purpose, his boots striking stone with the inevitability of an execution march. Wolves scrambled out of his path, pressing themselves against walls and columns, their submission absolute and their fear palpable. Cassandra stepped forward, her most seductive smile in place, her hand extended in greeting, but Kale walked past her as if she did not exist. Past Marcus, past the elders arranged in their ceremonial robes, past everyone and everything, until he stood directly in front of Alara, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body, so close she could count the flecks of amber in those impossible golden eyes. The hall had gone deathly silent. No one breathed. No one moved. No one dared even think too loudly as they watched their savage king, the Besta da Guerra who had never shown weakness, who had never hesitated, who had conquered kingdoms and slaughtered armies, stare down at a mute. Omega in a gray dress with dirt under her fingernails and bare feet. Alara's mind screamed at her to run, to bow, to do something other than stand there meeting his gaze like an equal. But her body would not obey. She was trapped in amber, suspended in a moment that felt both infinite and impossibly fragile. And then Kale did something that shattered every expectation, every assumption, every rule that had governed pack hierarchy since the first wolf drew breath. He knelt. The Alpha King, the war beast, the most dominant lichen in living memory, dropped to one knee before her, his head bowed, his hand placed over his heart in a gesture of absolute submission that no one in that hall had ever seen him make. The sound that rippled through the crowd was collective shock given voice, gasps and whispers and strangled noises of disbelief. Cassandra made a sound like she had been struck. Marcus stumbled backward, and Alara just stood there, trembling, staring down at the top of Cale's dark head, watching his shoulders rise and fall with each controlled breath. Mate. His voice was gravel and smoke, deep enough to rattle bones. And though he spoke only one word, it carried through the hall like thunder. My mate. He lifted his head, those golden eyes blazing with something fierce and possessive, and almost desperate. I have searched for you for 10 years. 10 years of war and blood and emptiness, and you were here. You were here all along. His hand moved slowly, carefully, as if she were something precious that might shatter, and he touched her cheek with fingers that were calloused and scarred and impossibly gentle. Speak to me. Please. Say something. Anything. Let me hear your voice. The cruelty of it broke something inside Alara's chest. He was asking for the one thing she could not give, the one thing she had never been able to give. Tears burned behind her eyes, and she shook her head slowly, her hands coming up in a helpless gesture that conveyed everything she could not say. I cannot. I am broken. I am not worthy. I am sorry. Cale's expression shifted, confusion giving way to understanding. Understanding giving way to something that looked like rage, but not at her. Never at her. Who did this to you? The question came out as a growl, and the temperature in the hall seemed to drop 10 degrees. Who made you believe you need to apologize for what you are? He stood slowly, pulling Alara up with him, his hands cradling her face like she was the most valuable thing in existence. You are mine, my mate, my queen, and I will burn this entire pack to ash if anyone has hurt you. The threat was not hyperbole. It was a promise, and every wolf present knew he meant every word. Cassandra's voice cut through the tension like a knife. This is absurd. She stepped forward, her beautiful face twisted with fury and disbelief. Alpha King, surely you are mistaken. This creature cannot be your mate. She is defective. She has no wolf. Speak, she cannot shift. She is nothing but a burden on this pack, kept alive only out of mercy and tradition. Her blue eyes glittered with malice as she addressed the crowd. We all know the truth. A true Luna must be strong, must be able to lead, must be able to command respect. How can someone who cannot even howl at the moon possibly stand beside the Alpha King? The growl that erupted from Kyle's chest was so low, so primal, that several wolves dropped to their bellies in instinctive terror. He did not release Alara, but his body shifted, muscles coiling beneath skin, eyes blazing with the kind of rage that preceded bloodshed. You dare! The words were barely human. You dare question the bond? You dare speak of my mate with such disrespect? He turned his full attention on Cassandra, and Alara watched the beta female's face drain of color. I could rip out your throat before you took another breath. I could paint these walls with your blood and sleep soundly afterward. The only reason you still draw air is because my mate has not given me permission to end you. But test me again, Beta, and I will show you exactly what the war beast does to those who threaten what is his. Marcus intervened quickly, his diplomatic training overriding his fear. Alpha King, please. Beta Cassandra speaks out of concern for the pack, not disrespect. Surely you can understand our confusion. The girl has been with us for years, and never once has she shown any indication of having a wolf, let alone the ability to be Luna. Perhaps if we could conduct the bonding ritual properly with the elders present, we could determine... Cale's laugh was harsh and humorless. Determine what, exactly? Whether the mate bond that burns in my veins is real? Whether my wolf, who has killed hundreds without remorse, who has never submitted to any living creature, recognizes his other half? I do not need your elders or your rituals or your permission. She is mine. That is all that matters. But Alara had stopped listening to the argument swirling around her, because something was happening inside her body, something that had never happened before. Her wolf, that silent presence that had always been just out of reach, was moving, waking up, rising from whatever deep place it had been hidden. She felt power surge through her veins like liquid moonlight, felt her senses sharpen until she could hear heartbeats across the room, smell fear and arousal and confusion as clearly as if they were colors painted in the air. And with that awakening came pain, searing, blinding pain that drove her to her knees, her hands clutching at her throat where something ancient and powerful was trying to break free. Kale was beside her instantly, his arms wrapping around her shaking body, his voice in her ear rough with concern. "What is happening? Talk to me. Show me. Do something." But Alara could not respond because images were flooding her mind, memories that were not hers. Visions of wolves who sang to the moon and commanded tides, of women with silver eyes who could kill with a whisper or heal with a touch, of power that had been feared and coveted and ultimately destroyed. She saw her mother, saw a woman with her same dark hair and delicate features, saw her placing hands on a baby's throat and whispering words in a language older than Pax or kings. A seal, a binding, a sacrifice. To keep you safe, the memory whispered. To hide you from those who would use your power or destroy. It. Forgive me, little moonbeam. Forgive me for taking your voice. But better silent and alive than singing and dead. The seal was breaking. Alara could feel it cracking like ice in spring. Could feel centuries of compressed power trying to claw its way free, and she had no idea how to control it, no idea how to stop it, no idea what would happen when it finally shattered completely. Her body convulsed, and Kale held her tighter, his own power rising to meet hers, his alpha command washing over her in waves that should have forced submission, but instead felt like an anchor, like something solid she could cling to in the storm. Everyone out. Kale's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Now, clear the hall. Anyone who remains in 10 seconds will be considered a threat, and I will respond accordingly. There was a stampede for the exits, wolves tripping over each other in their haste to escape the Alpha King's wrath, and the strange, terrifying power emanating from the girl in his arms. Within moments, the great hall was empty except for Kyle and Alara, and the shattered remains of what had been a victory celebration. Kyle lowered them both to the floor, cradling Alara against his chest, his lips against her temple, his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her ear. "I have you," he murmured, over and over like a prayer. "You are safe. You are mine. I have you." And somehow, impossibly, his presence helped. The power that had been trying to rip her apart began to settle, began to recognize the answering call of the mate bond, began to understand that it had finally found its counterpart. Alara's breathing slowed. Her trembling eased. And when she finally opened her eyes, she found herself staring up into Kale's face, found him looking at her with such fierce protectiveness and undisguised wonder that it stole whatever breath she had managed to recover. "There you are," he said softly, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheekbone. "Do you know what you are? Do you have any idea?" She shook her head, still unable to speak, still trapped in silence even as her wolf prowled restlessly just beneath her skin. Kyle smiled, and it transformed his brutal features into something almost beautiful. "You are a moon singer, the last of your kind. I thought they were only legends, stories told to cubs about wolves who could command the very essence of our nature. But you are real, and you are mine." He pressed his forehead to hers, his eyes closing as if savoring the contact. "They tried to hide you, tried to suppress what you are, but mate bonds cannot be fooled, and power will always find a way to surface. What do you think will happen next? Leave your predictions in the comments below. Over the next days, Alara's world transformed in ways she could never have imagined. Kale moved her from the servants' quarters to his own chambers, a massive suite at the highest point of the pack house that overlooked the entire territory. He treated her like precious glass, like something rare and irreplaceable, and his constant presence became both comfort and confusion. She was not accustomed to kindness, was not accustomed to being seen, and definitely was not accustomed to being touched with anything other than disdain. But Kale touched her constantly. Small gestures that seemed unconscious, his hand on the small of her back when they walked, his fingers brushing her hair from her face, his body always positioned between her and any potential threat. "You do not have to be afraid here," he told her one evening as they sat in his private study, a fire crackling in the hearth, the weight of his gaze heavy and warm. "These chambers are yours as much as mine. Everything I have, everything I am, belongs to you now." He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his features. "I know this is sudden. I know you did not ask for any of this. But the mate bond does not wait for permission or perfect timing. It simply is." He reached across, the space between them, offering his hand palm up, waiting for her to make the choice. Alara stared at that offered hand, at the scars that covered it, at the strength evident in every tendon and bone. She thought about all the years she had been invisible, all the times she had been dismissed and degraded, all the moments she had believed herself worthless. And then she thought about how it felt when Kyle looked at her, how his presence made her wolf surge with something that might be joy, how his scent wrapped around her like protection and promise. Slowly, carefully, she placed her smaller hand in his, felt his fingers close around hers with infinite gentleness, felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. "There," Kale murmured, his thumb stroking over her knuckles. "One step at a time. We have forever to learn each other." But forever was a luxury they might not have, because Cassandra was not the type to accept defeat gracefully, and the revelation of Alara's true nature had painted a target on her back that extended far beyond pack politics. There were wolves who remembered the Moonsingers, remembered what they could do, remembered why they had been systematically hunted to extinction, and there were those who would do anything to possess that power, or ensure it could never threaten them again. The attack came 3 nights later. Alara woke to the sound of shattering glass and the acrid smell of smoke. She bolted upright in the massive bed she still was not accustomed to, her heart racing, her senses screaming danger. Kyle was already moving, his body flowing from sleep to lethal awareness in a heartbeat, his eyes blazing gold in the darkness. "Stay here," he commanded, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Lock the door behind me. Do not open it for anyone but me. Do you understand?" She nodded frantically, her hands clutching the sheets, watching as he grabbed a sword from the wall and moved toward the door with predatory purpose. But staying put had never been Alara's strength when others were in danger. She could hear screams now, could smell blood mixing with smoke, could feel her wolf clawing frantically at her control. Something was very wrong. Something was attacking the pack house, and every instinct she possessed demanded she help, demanded she protect, demanded she stop being the helpless Omega everyone believed her to be. She threw off the blankets and ran to the window, looked down at chaos unfolding below. Rogues, dozens of them, their eyes wild with bloodlust, their forms twisted and wrong in ways that suggested dark magic or corruption. They poured through breached walls like a plague, killing indiscriminately, setting fires that consumed everything they touched. And there, directing them from the shadows, stood a figure Alara recognized. Cassandra. The beta female's beautiful face was lit by flames, her expression one of triumphant madness, her hands moving in gestures that seemed to guide the rogues like puppets on strings. She had done this, had betrayed the entire pack, had opened the gates to monsters, had orchestrated this massacre. But why? The answer came in Cassandra's shouted words, audible even from this distance. Find the Moonsinger. Bring her to me alive. Kill anyone who gets in your way. But I want her breathing. Her power will be mine. And when I control the moon itself, not even the war beast will be able to stop me. Alara's blood ran cold. This was her fault. These people were dying because of what she was, because of power she had not asked for and did not know how to use. She watched Kyle tear through rogues below like they were made of paper, his wolf form massive and terrible, his rage absolute. But there were too many. Even he could not be everywhere at once, could not protect everyone, could not stop the tide of violence that threatened to drown them all. She pressed her hands against the cool glass, feeling utterly helpless, feeling the old shame and worthlessness creep back into her mind. You are nothing. You cannot even protect the people around you. You should have stayed hidden. You should have stayed silent. But then her wolf surged forward with a force that nearly knocked her off her feet, and with that surge came a voice, not spoken aloud, but crystal clear in her mind nonetheless. You are not nothing. You are a moon singer. You are the moon's daughter, the tide's sister, the storm's beloved child. And it is time to remember what that means. The seal her mother had placed shattered completely, and power exploded through Alara's body like a supernova. Her eyes, which had always been ordinary brown, blazed silver bright enough to illuminate the entire room. Her skin began to glow with soft lunar light. And when she opened her mouth, the voice that had been stolen from her returned not as speech, but as song. The sound that poured from Alara's throat was unlike anything heard in generations. It was haunting and beautiful and absolutely otherworldly, notes that seemed to vibrate on frequencies beyond normal hearing, melody that carried command and comfort and power so immense it made the air itself shimmer. The window in front of her exploded outward, glass transforming into glittering rain that caught the moonlight and fell like silver tears. And Alara, who had never been brave, who had always hidden, who had spent her entire life trying to disappear, stepped out into empty air and did not fall. She floated above the burning pack house, her gray dress billowing around her, her dark hair moving in a wind that touched nothing else, her song growing louder and more complex with each passing second. Below, rogues stopped mid-attack, their savage expressions shifting to confusion, then wonder, then absolute compulsion. They could not resist the call, could not fight the command woven into every note. One by one, they lowered their weapons, their eyes glazing over, their bodies swaying in time to music that rewrote their very nature. Pack wolves who had been fighting for their lives stopped and stared, mouths open, tears streaming down faces as they experienced something sacred and terrible and impossibly beautiful. Kel shifted back to human form, standing in the center of carnage, his body covered in blood and wounds, his eyes locked on the glowing figure above. Alara, he breathed, and even from this distance, she heard him, heard the awe in his voice, the fear, the love. She looked down at him, this savage king who had knelt before her when she was nothing, who had claimed her when she was broken, who had given her permission to be more than the world said she could be. And she smiled. Then she turned her attention to Cassandra, and her song changed. The beta female tried to run, but Alara's voice wrapped around her like chains, dragging her forward step by stumbling step until she stood directly beneath the Moonsinger's terrible radiance. "Please," Cassandra whimpered, all her beauty and confidence stripped away, leaving only naked terror. "Please, I did not mean it. I was confused. I was jealous. Please do not kill me." Alara descended slowly until her bare feet touched scorched earth. until she stood face to face with the woman who had tormented her for years, who had called her worthless, who had just tried to steal her power and murder everyone she cared about. And then Alara did something that shocked everyone present. She stopped singing. The sudden silence was deafening, the absence of that otherworldly voice leaving a void that ached. Alara reached out and placed one glowing hand on Cassandra's chest, directly over her heart. And when she spoke, her voice was rusty from years of disuse but clear and strong and utterly unafraid. "I forgive you." 3 words. Simple. Devastating. True. I forgive you because holding on to hate would poison what I am becoming. But forgiveness does not mean freedom from consequences. She pressed harder, and Cassandra gasped as silver light poured into her body, burning away something dark and twisted that had taken root in her soul. When Alara withdrew her hand, Cassandra collapsed, sobbing, her power as a beta stripped away, her wolf reduced to something small and manageable, her ability to harm anyone ever again removed as cleanly as a surgeon's blade. "You will live," Alara said quietly. "You will serve this pack as an omega for the rest of your days, and you will learn what it means to be powerless. Perhaps then you will understand why compassion matters more than strength." She turned away from the broken woman and walked toward Kyle, her glow beginning to fade, her exhaustion evident in every step. He caught her before she fell, his arms wrapping around her with fierce possessiveness, his face buried in her hair. "You magnificent, terrifying, perfect creature," he murmured against her temple. "You just saved everyone. You just proved that moonsingers were not legends. You just became the most valuable and most hunted wolf in existence." He pulled back enough to look at her, his golden eyes serious. "Every pack in every territory will hear about this. Some will want to worship you. Others will want to control you. And many will want to eliminate the threat you represent. Our life together will not be easy." Alara raised one hand and touched his scarred face, her smile tired but genuine. "Nothing worthwhile ever is," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word spoken. "But I spent my whole life being easy, being quiet, being invisible. I think it is time I tried being impossible instead." She leaned forward and kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise. Around them, the pack began to cheer, their voices rising in celebration and wonder, their fear transforming into hope. Because their king had found his queen, and she was everything they never knew they needed. If you want to see how this story ends, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of change and challenge. Alara had to learn to control her power, had to understand the scope of what being a moonsinger truly meant. Kale brought in ancient texts, hired scholars who had studied the old ways, created a safe space for her to experiment and grow without fear of judgment or failure. She discovered she could heal with her voice, could command wolves with a whisper, could literally pull power from the moon itself and reshape it according to her will. But every gift came with a price, and using her abilities left her drained and vulnerable. "You are pushing too hard," Kyle told her one evening, finding her collapsed in the training yard, her body trembling with exhaustion, silver light still flickering weakly around her fingertips. He lifted her easily, carrying her back toward the pack house, his expression torn between pride and concern. "Your power is immense, but you are still learning. You do not have to master everything in a week." Alara rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady drum of his heartbeat. "People are counting on me now," she said softly. "The pack looks to me for guidance, for protection. I cannot afford to be weak." "You are not weak," Kyle said firmly, kicking open the door to their chambers and laying her gently on the bed. "You are mortal. There is a difference. Even moonsingers have limits." He sat beside her, his hand finding hers, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm. "I have I've been a warrior my entire life, fought in more battles than I can count, survived things that should have killed me. And do you know what I learned? He waited until she met his eyes. Strength is not about never falling. It is about getting back up. About knowing when to rest so you can fight another day. About trusting others to share the burden. She squeezed his hand, feeling the truth in his words, feeling the mate bond pulse between them like a living thing. They had not completed the claiming ritual yet, had not sealed their connection in the way pack law required. Both of them had been too busy dealing with aftermath and politics and the constant stream of challenges to their authority. But lying here in the quiet darkness, feeling his warmth beside her, Alara thought maybe it was time. "Kale," she whispered, her free hand coming up to touch his face. "I want to complete the bond. I want to be yours completely. No more waiting. No more politics. Just us." His eyes blazed. Gold, his control visibly fraying. "Are you certain? Once we claim each other, there is no going back. We will be bound for life, our souls tied together, our fates intertwined. If I die, you will feel it. If you hurt, I will bleed. The mate bond is not romantic poetry. It is absolute and permanent and sometimes painful." Alara smiled, pulling him down until their faces were inches apart. "I have spent my entire life disconnected from everything and everyone. The idea of being permanently connected to you does not scare me. It sounds like coming home." The claiming was private, witnessed only by the moon through open windows, sealed with bites that marked them both as taken, consummated with a tenderness and passion that left them tangled together as dawn broke over the territory. When Alara woke, she could feel Kale's presence in her mind like a second heartbeat, could sense his emotions as clearly as her own, could draw on his strength when hers faltered and vice versa. The mate bond settled into place like a key finding its lock, and for the first time in her life, Alara felt complete. But completion brought new dangers. Word of the Moonsinger spread like wildfire, and within a month, delegations from other packs began arriving at Blood Moon territory. Some came with offers of alliance, promises of protection and resources in exchange for access to Alara's power. Others came with thinly veiled threats, suggestions that such dangerous ability should be controlled or contained for the good of all wolves. And still others came with assassination attempts disguised as diplomacy, poisons, and hired killers and magical attacks that tested every defense the pack possessed. Kyle handled most of the political maneuvering with brutal efficiency, his reputation as the war beast serving them well when words failed and violence became necessary. But there were situations that required Alara's direct involvement, moments when only her power could resolve conflicts or prevent bloodshed. She found herself thrust into a role she had never wanted, standing before councils of elders and speaking with authority she barely felt, using her voice not to sing but to command, to negotiate, to lead. "You are doing well," Kale told her after a particularly difficult meeting with the Western Pack Alliance, where she had managed to prevent a war through careful diplomacy and a subtle demonstration of power that left no doubt about the consequences of aggression. "Better than well. You are magnificent." He pulled her into his arms, breathing in her scent, letting her presence calm the ever-present rage that simmered beneath his skin. "I know this is not what you imagined for your life. I know being Luna, being a symbol, being a target is exhausting and terrifying and unfair. But it is my life now," Alara finished, her arms wrapping around his waist. "And I am learning to claim it the same way I claimed my voice. One day at a time, one challenge at a time, one moment of impossible courage at a time." She tilted her head back, meeting his golden gaze. "Besides, I have you, the war beast, the most feared alpha in existence. As long as you stand beside me, I can face anything." His answering smile was fierce and tender all at once. "Always," he promised. Until the moon falls from the sky and the stars go dark, I will stand beside you. The final challenge came 6 months after their claiming, delivered in a sealed letter bearing the mark of the High Council, the governing body that oversaw all pack territories and enforced ancient laws. The message was simple and devastating. Ilara was summoned to appear before them, to demonstrate her abilities under controlled conditions, to prove that she was not a threat to the stability of their society. Refusal would result in Blood Moon Pack being declared rogue and subject to extermination. Acceptance meant walking into what was almost certainly a trap, facing 13 of the oldest and most powerful alphas in existence, any one of whom might decide her power was too dangerous to allow. "We do not go," Kale said flatly, crumpling the letter in his fist. "We do not bow to their demands. We do not put you at risk for their peace of mind. Let them come. Let them try to take what is ours. I will paint the entire territory red before I let anyone harm you." His wolf was close to the surface, his eyes more gold than human, his rage palpable. Ilara understood. The mate bond meant he felt her fear as his own, felt her vulnerability like a wound, and his every instinct demanded he protect her at any cost. But she also understood politics, understood that refusing the summons would condemn not just them, but every wolf in Blood Moon to a life of running and hiding. "We have to go," she said quietly, placing her hands on his chest, feeling his heart thunder beneath her palms. "Not because they have the right to demand it, but because we need to show them that I am not a weapon waiting to explode, that I am in control, that Moonsingers were hunted to extinction because of fear and misunderstanding, not because we were actually dangerous." She met his furious gaze steadily. "I will not let history repeat itself. I will not let fear win." The journey to High Council territory took 3 days, and they traveled with an escort of 50 of Blood Moon's finest warriors, Kale's paranoia ensuring every possible precaution. Ilara spent the time practicing her control, working with her power until she could call it forth or suppress it at will, until her silver glow became as natural as breathing. She knew this might be the most important performance of her life, knew that one mistake could doom them all, and she refused to fail because of lack of preparation. The High Council met in a massive amphitheater carved from living stone, 13 thrones arranged in a semicircle, each occupied by an alpha whose power and age made the air itself feel heavy. Kyle and Ilara entered. Together, his hand on the small of her back, his presence a solid anchor that kept her grounded. The lead counselor, an ancient alpha named Theron, whose hair was white as snow and eyes black as void, studied them both with an expression of clinical interest. "Ilara of Blood Moon," he intoned, his voice carrying despite the vast space. "You stand accused of possessing abilities that violate natural order. How do you plead?" "I am not on trial," Ilara said, her voice clear and steady despite her racing heart. "I did not choose to be born a Moonsinger any more than you chose to be born Alpha. My existence is not a crime, and I will not apologize for surviving when my entire bloodline was hunted to extinction by fear masquerading as justice." A ripple of surprise moved through the council. Clearly they had expected submission or defiance, not this calm assertion of fact. Theron leaned forward. "You claim your power is natural. Prove it. Show us that you can control what you are. Show us that you are not a danger, waiting to destroy us all." Ilara stepped away from Kyle, moving to the center of the amphitheater floor, aware of hundreds of eyes watching her every move. She closed her eyes and reached deep inside herself, finding the well of power that had once been sealed and was now fully awakened. She let it rise slowly, carefully, silver light beginning to glow around her body like phosphorescence. Then she began to sing. But this was not the compulsion she had used on the rogues, not the destructive force she was capable of unleashing. This was something gentler, something beautiful and healing and utterly safe. Her voice filled the amphitheater, notes rising and falling in complex harmonies that seemed to resonate with the stone itself. And as she sang, flowers began to grow. Tiny blooms pushing up through cracks in the ancient floor, vines crawling up walls, green life spreading in defiance of season or soil. The scent of jasmine and moonflower filled the air, and one by one, the hardened warriors and ancient alphas watching felt tears slip down their faces without understanding why. Because Alara was not showing them power meant to destroy. She was showing them power meant to create, to nurture, to heal what had been broken. When she finished and the last note faded into silence, the amphitheater had been transformed into a garden, beauty growing in a place that had known only judgment and severity. Alara opened her eyes, her glow fading, her voice steady as she addressed the council directly. This is what Moonsingers were before we were hunted. We were healers, peacemakers, bridges between wolves and the natural world. Yes, we can fight when necessary. Yes, we have power that could be dangerous in the wrong hands. But the same is true of every alpha in this room. And yet you sit in positions of authority and trust. She spread her hands, indicating the flowers around her. Judge me by my actions, not by your fears. And if you still find me guilty of the crime of existing, then do what you must. But know that you will be repeating the mistakes that led to genocide, and history will not remember you kindly. The silence that followed was absolute. Theron stared at her with an expression that was impossible to read, his ancient eyes searching her face as if looking for something specific. Finally, slowly, he rose from his throne and descended to the amphitheater floor. The other counselors watched with various expressions of shock and curiosity as the most powerful alpha alive walked toward a young woman who had just challenged the entire council system. He stopped in front of Alara, close enough that she could see the weight of centuries in his gaze, and then he did something that shattered every expectation. He knelt. Just as Kyle had knelt months ago, Theron dropped to one knee and bowed his head in recognition and respect. "I was there," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper, "when the last Moonsinger enclave was destroyed. I was young, barely a century old, and I believed the lies we were told about your kind being dangerous and uncontrollable. I stood by while children were slaughtered, while women who had only ever used their gifts to heal were burned alive." He looked up, and Alara saw genuine remorse in those black eyes. "I have carried that shame for 500 years, and now you stand before me, proving everything I destroyed was born from ignorance and fear, and you offer not vengeance but demonstration, not violence but beauty." He stood slowly, his hand coming to rest over his heart. The High Council recognizes Alara of Bloodmoon as a true Moonsinger, heir to an ancient and sacred tradition. Her existence is not a crime but a miracle, and any pack or alpha who seeks to harm her will answer to this council and to me personally. He turned to address the other counselors. "Let this be recorded in our histories. Let it be known that we failed once, and we will not fail again. Moonsingers are under our protection, now and always." If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who loves epic romance. Tell me in the comments, did you see this ending coming? The journey back to Bloodmoon territory felt different from the tense trip to the council. Alara sat beside Kale in their transport, her head on his shoulder, his arm wrapped protectively around her, both of them processing what had just happened. "You did it," Kale murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You changed everything, not through force or fear, but through truth and courage, and that impossible heart of yours." She smiled, her fingers lacing through his. "We did it. Your faith in me, your protection, your love, it gave me the strength to stand before them. I could not have done any of this alone. You will never be alone again," he promised, his golden eyes fierce with devotion. "Whatever comes next, Whatever challenges we face, whatever enemies emerge from shadows, we face them together. Alpha King and Moonsinger Queen, War Beast and Moon's Daughter, bound by fate and choice and a love that refused to be silenced. Alara turned in his arms, kissing him deeply, pouring everything she felt through the mate bond, feeling his answering surge of emotion that was part passion, part possession, part reverence. They returned to find Blood Moon transformed in their absence. The pack had used the time to rebuild damaged structures, to plant new gardens, to create gathering spaces where wolves could come together without the rigid hierarchy that had defined them for so long. The Omegas, who had once been invisible, were now valued as essential, their contributions recognized and celebrated. Cassandra worked among them, her former arrogance stripped away, her eyes holding something that might eventually become wisdom born from humility. She met Alara's gaze briefly as the royal pair passed, and though no words were spoken, understanding passed between them. Forgiveness was a gift, but redemption was work that took a lifetime. That evening, Kale and Alara stood on the balcony of their chambers, looking out over the territory as the full moon rose huge and luminous in the sky. "Do you ever think about what your life might have been if I had not returned when I did?" Kyle asked, his arms wrapped around her from behind, his chin resting on top of her head. "If you had remained hidden, your power still sealed, your voice still silent." Alara leaned back, against his solid warmth, watching moonlight paint everything silver. "Sometimes. But then I remember that I was dying slowly in that silence. Maybe not physically, but in every way that mattered. You did not just claim me as your mate. You gave me permission to claim myself. And what a self you have claimed," he said with a smile in his voice. "Terrifying and beautiful and absolutely impossible to forget." She laughed, the sound free and genuine, so different from the silent girl she had. "Ben, I learned from the best. After all, you are the war beast who knelt before someone everyone else saw as worthless. You saw value where no one else bothered to look. That takes a different kind of courage than facing enemies in battle." She turned in his arms, her hands sliding up to cup his scarred face. "Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. Thank you for hearing me when I had no voice. Thank you for loving all the parts of me that I was taught to hide." Kyle captured her mouth, in a kiss that started gentle and grew increasingly heated, his hands mapping the curves of her body with possessive familiarity, his wolf purring with satisfaction at having his mate safe and whole, and his. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were molten gold. "Come to bed," he commanded, his voice dropping to that gravelly tone that made her shiver. "Let me show you exactly how much I worship every impossible inch of you." Alara let him lead her inside, let him strip away her clothes with reverent hands, let him lay her out on silk sheets and prove with touch and taste and whispered words that she was valued, was cherished, was loved beyond measure. Later, wrapped in each other and drowsy with satisfaction, Alara felt her power pulse in time with the moon outside their window. She could sense wolves across the territory settling in for the night, could feel the contentment and security that had taken root in her pack, could even detect the faint stirrings of other Moonsinger bloodlines that had gone dormant to survive persecution and might now, finally, be able to wake. Her silence had ended, but her song was just beginning. And with Kale beside her, with a pack that had learned to value strength in all its forms, with a future that held both challenges and triumphs, Alara knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. The war beast and the silent girl who found her voice. The Alpha King and the Moonsinger Queen. Two souls who had been broken and remade, who had found in each other the courage to become more than they ever dreamed possible. And when the moon rose full and bright over Blood Moon territory, those who listened carefully could hear it. A song of hope and healing, of love and transformation, of a girl who refused to stay silent, and a beast who learned that true strength came not from inspiring fear, but from protecting those you loved. The song of a new beginning, written in moonlight and sealed with forever.